Congratulations again on behalf of us all, and thank you for your bravery in being here. We know that it is difficult and trying times, and we're grateful for you, not only the bravery you demonstrate in all that you do, but being here with us and accepting the award. And it's a tall task to be interviewing a professional interviewer, but we'll do our best. And so I guess I would ask, given the nature of your work, you having run newspapers in Iran and your regular interview channel, what is it about your reporting? What particular subjects? What is it about your work that evoked such a harsh response from the regime that so perturbs the regime? What is it about Iran International that you think has made you one of the #1 targets of the regime in Tehran?
Okay, you want to start? Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Geneva Summit, for this award to Iran International. And first, I need to really mention, we were speaking with Mr. Ramezanpour, this is an award to Iranian people who are the voice of what is happening inside Iran, and without them, probably we wouldn't have known many of the stories you shared with the audience today, and rightly Ghazale and Kylie as well. I think the reason this regime is so against Iran International as a media organization, and they designated us as a terrorist organization, as you said, is they're afraid of the flow of the information, which cannot be stopped in 21st century. You know, in the last few years, Iranians themselves have been the main source of informing the world about what is happening to them. And in opposite, also, Iranian regime doesn't want Iranian people to know about what is happening around them across the region and in the world in terms of prosperity, democracies, the value of liberal democracy, the economic situation of prosperous countries. So they don't understand what they could have and what they don't have. So it's a two-way thing from Iran to the world and from the world to the Iranian people. So I think that's the reason they're against us. And but I think you said it all in your speech, introducing the award. This will not be stopped, and we will not be silenced.
Thank you, Brandon, for your very strong and moving speech about Iran International. What you said was true. What our colleagues in Iran International are doing is just not doing what they are doing as a job. They are part of the story in Iran. They are part of the story because they are journalists in Iran. That's what journalists in Iran used to do. You mentioned about our coverage related to Mahsa movement. Right now that we are talking, Elahe Mohammadi and Nilufar Hamedi, who were the first journalists in Iran, reported what happened to Mahsa and her family and what military IRGC did to them and to people around them. They released just a few weeks ago after huge force from international community and people in Iran, but still they are not able to work. Technically, they are house arrested. It's not just them. A few weeks ago, a group of economic journalists, they spoke about the corruption. They are still in the jail. Many journalists who has worked in Iran are still in the jail. And we, Iran International, we see ourselves as part of Iranian journalists who are working to report what's happening in Iran. The reason, you mentioned the reason that Iranian authorities, IRGC, Ministry of Intelligence, Raisi, Khamenei, are so angry about us. It's not just about the information that we are publishing. They have great concerns because it's coming from Iranian journalists. They used to suppress Iranian journalists for more than 40 years. I don't want to go to details of what happened. You mentioned what we used to do. We used to publish a newspaper, and then they used to shut down the paper, and we used to go to somewhere else. But many people still are prison because of that. More people, they can't work as a journalist, so they are doing many other things. Cab driver, they're doing another thing. So the concern comes from the connection between Iran International and Iran journalism and their sources. You spoke about Mahsa, and I mentioned Nilufar and Elahe. But if you go, you can see many people still are in prison. You mentioned in a way, and I think some Kylie or maybe mentioned that. Still, Narges Mohammadi, winner of Peace Prize, is in jail. Nasrin Sotoudeh. Recently, Sadiqeh Wasmaghi, many women, they are still in the jail. Why? Because they have been subject of our stories in Iran International. We used to say what they used to say in Iran. So Iran International, and what Iran International has done is reflection of what our subjects of our stories, these brave people in Iran are doing. So because of that, I'm saying thank you to you and this summit for considering the big achievement of these journalists and people who have spoke with us and people who sent their stories from Iran to us. So I'm saying thank you, not just because of me, in behalf of my personal feeling. I'm saying thank you in behalf of our colleague in Iran International, our audience, and the brave people who has been subject of our stories.
Well, the thanks are to all of them and to all of you. And it sounds like from what you were saying, Pouria, in terms of the role of Iran International as both reflecting international developments and the reality of the international community to Iranians, but also having journalists and sources on the ground that allow you to share with the world what's happening within Iran. And Aliasghar, as you mentioned, the deep consequences and costs for your teammates and for your sources on the ground. How would you suggest that governments help those that are so bravely in touch with you, that are so bravely speaking out that you're reporting on? And now, given your own targeting, the transnational repression being exercised, how can democratic nations, how can civil society be defending both Iranian journalists and human rights defenders within Iran and brave journalists like you facing consequences outside of it?
Sure. Brandon, before I answer to your question, we named Mahsa a lot during our speeches since yesterday when we say Mahsa movement and the fact that she was brutally killed by the regime. We need to mention hundreds of young Iranians, boys and girls, who were on the streets chanting for the freedom and overthrowing this regime, and they were killed by the bullets, and the families are the voices of their children right now. And there are many political prisoners right now spending sentences in jail who have spoken out about the repression and the human rights violences in Iran. Answering to your question, I think in terms of helping Iranian people and Iranian journalists and the activists and human rights activists in terms of transnational repression and other things, I think Western governments need to come to the conclusion that enough is enough. The approach they have been taking towards the Iranian regime, especially since 10, 15 years ago. It's that we need to maintain our direct talks with this regime. We need to have diplomatic, actually, relations to reach diplomatic solutions with this regime. It has been tried. You know, I'm not against any diplomacy. I'm not against diplomatic, negotiations. But what we need to ask these politicians who say that the direct talks should be maintained in terms of changing the Iranian regime's behavior, what has been the effect of that in the past 15 years? I'm talking about my own case. What happened to me it might be the first of its kind that someone got close enough to me to be able to attack me finally. But it's not the first time Iranian regime did plot an attack against the journalists outside Iran on European soil and on British soil. There was a report in the UK that since beginning of 2022, there have been at least 15 plots which have been foiled by the British security services against Iranian journalists and activists. So we need to ask this question, that the approach towards the Iranian regime is clearly not working. What they can do, I think, is sending a clear message to Tehran that if this is being repeated, there will be severe and more serious consequences for you. For example, there was a plot against two of my colleagues in this, which was foiled by British security services in 2022, and ITV News revealed it in December last year. After that, the government imposed some sanctions. But what happened to me, it was about 3 months after those sanctions, because those sanctions probably are not impactful enough that to be able to change the regime's behavior. I think what they need to chase internationally, I think they first need to come together as a united front against human rights abuses and transnational repression. Both all UK, European Union, United States and Canada, as the representatives of free world. And then they need to send a united message and a clear message to the Iranian regime that this will not be tolerated and there will be serious consequences for you. Otherwise, probably the attack against me was not the last one.
Thank you very much, Pouria. Aliasghar, do you have any thoughts as well on the matter?
Pouria mentioned that this attack wouldn't be, maybe, the final act of IRGC or Iranian authorities. Why? Because I think we need to look in a new development in targeting freedom of speech by the Iranian authorities. It's not new to put a journalist in jail or kill a writer in Iran. It's not new. But what happened to us in Iran International and to Pouria in London and to Sima and Fardad in DC, it's another thing. It's kind of related to international invasion. I call it international invasion because it's something like invasion of Russia to Ukraine. It's something like that. So it's kind of an attack against the freedom of speech, not just inside the country. It's international effort. It's coordinated between Russia, between China, between Iran, and we can see here, in the face of everyone here, they were talking about their experience. We have the same situation. So I'm saying that threats against Iran International is part of threats against the international security. So that's the nature of the threats is changing. So we need to take decision. Pouria mentioned political aspect of that. I want to mention the other side of the story. What you are doing here in the Human Rights and Democracy Summit is very important to us. Not only for us, for people in Iran. Because yesterday we were in the building of United Nations, officially territory of the United Nations. I was there, and I was thinking, this is the better part of United Nations compared to Security Council and General Council that Raisi and other people, Khamenei, they can go and talk. Here is our place. So I think here is the better part of United Nations. And if you continue what you are doing, it would be very helpful for everyone. And so I'm saying to journalists around the world and media, we need to do something together. Otherwise, the international, I can say the international coalition against the freedom of speech and journalism, they leave nothing for us to talk maybe in New Year.
Just adding to what Mr. Ramezanpour said, I think this is, I'm saying this as a journalist. It's not really as an activist or a political commentator, because that's what they've been saying, especially since 5 years ago when they announced their second phase of revolution. It was the 40th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And they said, they clearly say 21st century is the century of Russia and China. They are building up coalitions with these dictatorships, and they have no hesitation acting against core liberal values in the West. I mean, what happened to me, what is happening to Iranian journalists, and what is happening to Iranian people inside and also Iranians in diaspora is not only against Iranians. They are coming for you guys. We need to see the fact, what they're doing in Middle East right now. They're funding all the terrorist groups across the Middle East. It's a fact. It's not a political comment, or it's not activism talking about these things. We need to stand up, because what they aim for is coming after Western civilization. This is what they say publicly in their speeches. They say we need to destroy some countries. They want to disappear Israel from the map. They want to destroy Western civilization. They are against liberal democracy. And they say that clearly. And what we are seeing in these days, in Western countries, on British soil, on European soil, on American and Canadian soil, is part of their bigger agenda for next years. They have plans. There was a report in BBC News about 5-6 months ago, which was revealed by my friend Kasra Arabi, working with a BBC reporter. They had senior IRGC commanders talking to the British youth through Zoom, encouraging them to kill Jews in the middle of London and promote Shia ideology to export the Islamic Revolution to European countries. That's what they're doing. It's not about, we guessing and talking and just commenting on these things. These are the facts. That's what we're talking about in our shows and programs, and probably that's why they're upset at us. But we need to see that. They are coming for us. They are not just coming against Iranians. They are coming after Western civilization, which is under severe threat by the Iranian regime, which is building up coalitions with powers like China and Russia, because they have the security backing from Putin, and they're helping Putin in war against Ukraine. And also they have the backing from China financially. They're exporting 2.3 million barrels per day right now. Who is buying that? Under US sanctions. We need to see these facts. They're making money and they're funding terrorism. They're oppressing people inside Iran. They're killing journalists. They're, plotting attacks against us here. And still we are seeking, just negotiations and diplomatic solutions with them. I think it's time for politicians in the West and policymakers to come together for a new approach.
Well, thank you so much for those remarks, in which I think really sum up a lot of the conversations that were taking place throughout the day today. What might otherwise seem like disparate panels on Chinese Communist Party repression, on Putin's aggression against Ukraine, on dictatorships in Latin America. There is this common thread between them all, as you so eloquently and aptly describe, this new sort of axis of evil, where you've got the regime that is in Tehran trampling on liberal democratic norms. The attacks against you are attacks against all of us everywhere, and where these regimes are trading best practices. So as you described in response to the question, the need for all of our democracies to similarly come together. And when Masih Alinejad was here, she is a previous recipient and took the stage, she had a powerful line that still resonates. You know, a lot of politicians came up after the Mahsa Amini protests and started cutting their hair. She said, why are you cutting your hair? You should be cutting your ties to Tehran. Cut your hair and then go and have a diplomatic negotiation doesn't mean very much for all those people who are still languishing in prison. It's important that you name them, and I'm grateful that you did for this audience, for the public, Narges Mohammadi, Nazrin Sotoudeh, Tumas Salehi, and the hundreds of others who continue to languish in unjust imprisonment. And the work you do every day exposing their plight and pain to the world is incredibly urgent. And again, I understand, based on the response to your first question, the very reason for why you're being targeted in the first place. So I guess based on all of that, a more personal question, in the face of what must be incredibly challenging circumstances, the difficulty of the nature of what you're reporting, and then the oppression and repression that you're facing, where you're here with state-supplied bodyguards. How do you respond to that? How do you develop the courage, the resilience? What do you draw upon to continue the brave work that you do every day?
Yep. I said that in my interviews with some media channels and newspapers since 6 weeks ago. Brandon, there is a difference between being scared and being concerned. Of course, what happened to me and what is happening to us on a daily basis as journalists and a media organization, it is concerning. We are taking necessary steps and measures to be as safe as possible. But if the attacks and the plots and the threats are to silence us and to scare us, it's not working. We are not scared. We are concerned, of course, but we are not scared. And probably the audience might be interested knowing I insisted in having my show 1 week after the attack because the attack happened on a Friday. It was 29th of March, and my show goes on air every Friday. I had the show the week after to send a message back to whoever plotted it and whatever the motive was, that the show, as the English say, as they say in English, the show must go on, and it is going on, and that was a message to the plotters. And I think we are living in a different world, and being a journalist generally is a tough choice people make. Even foreign journalists, American journalists, Canadian journalists, they're always at risk. Being a journalist means being at risk because of the job, and they reveal information to the people. But being journalists in countries like Iran, China, Russia, and these dictatorships is a double risk journalists take because they are being chased by their own governments as well. So we are not afraid. We are concerned. We try to be as safe as possible, but the show is going on, and it will go on.
Well, thank you very much.
I don't want to take your time, but I need to mention one thing. Unfortunately, because of the security measures, I can't go to details. We received an audio message yesterday from Iran, and it contains a call from Ministry of Intelligence to a young man in Iran, talking to him and threatening him because one member of his family works Iran International. So I want to say thank you to our families, family of Iran International doulas inside Iran, which they are in the direct threats from Iranian authorities, but still they are supporting their family, the other member of their families here in London, in DC, and everywhere.
Well, Pouria Aliasghar, thank you again for being here with us. Thank you for your bravery, for your courage, and congratulations again on being the 2024 recipient of the Geneva Summit for Democracy and Human Rights Courage Award.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geneva Summit.